Lori, we're so grateful to welcome you back for our third annual interview with David Hua. Thank you to everyone in the community who completed our survey to share your feedback and your priorities with Lori. So Hua, go ahead and take it away.
Hey, hi. All right, Lori, thanks for being here. Really appreciate the time. Nicole, thank you for that address. Really appreciate the governor and just the support. We all need it, and we'll do our part to help bridge the gap there. All right, so Lori, this is not the Redwoods, but hopefully it's somewhat naturey where you're at. We certainly have had challenges that we're facing in the industry, and we're going to dive in. But first, I want to take a moment just to acknowledge some of the wins we've created in the last year. It seems like many years, but I just kind of want to run through that list. So cannabis is legal in California. It's essential. That's the big one. We showed up to keep the gears turning and keep the industry moving forward. I know that could have been a really huge setback for all of us if it didn't move forward. Compassion is back, right? That's great. Authored by Senator Scott Wiener, that went into effect, removing the tax liability from compassionate donations. Social equity grants are out. That's finally moving, and we got the attention and greater support of the industry. And equity products are getting on the shelves into customers' hands, and they are amazing. The feds, they asked for information on licensed operators, and the BCC pushed back. Thank you. Metric staged up and launched. That in itself is a huge lift, as everyone here knows. Single license search launched. BCC, CDPH, CDFA. You heard our struggles with the looting and the burglaries and things that were happening there, and you guys came through with that. More licenses have come online. That pipeline continues to move through, and while you're managing other pieces there. More jurisdictions are creating pathways and programs to launch new licenses. I think this November, we're going to see a lot more access in these jurisdictions that didn't think otherwise. New products are being developed to utilize the new cannabinoid technology. And furthermore, for safety, many dispensaries shifted to a COVID safety first retail model, which allowed curbside pickup, which allowed contactless delivery, all of those things which the BCC helped push forward pretty quickly. So lots of good wins there. Thank you so much for that. We have around 5 topics that we're going to dive into. So let's get right into it. Sound good?
Hey, thank you. By the way, it's not the same being in my office as it was out in the, out in the wilderness, but I think you've done a great job. So thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. Thank you. And I guess before we begin, is there anything that you want to just say that's off the top of your mind or what's going on in your world?
Thank you. It's always nice to be able to at least tell everybody what we're doing here. I think, you've pretty much gone over a lot of what I was going to talk about. So thank you. So, but I think like everybody else, this year's just been extremely challenging. And I can't believe we're already in October. And I think all of us are ready to turn the page on 2020 and head to 2021. But I think with consolidation, I think there's so many conversations that need to be had still. And so I always like to say, as tired as we get, we still have to have the conversation because really we need your input over the next 10 months as we head towards that consolidation of July 2021.
Yeah, that's pretty big. Yeah. And we'll dive into that. I think that's a big shift that's happening.
Yeah.
And that's supposed to happen by July 2021. I think that's the timeline.
That's the timeline.
In your view, I'd love to hear, what are the main issues that this agency consolidation will have to overcome or will solve. I mean, I know you guys have been taking a lot of meetings across departments with stakeholders. You've heard a lot of issues that have come up. What does that timeline look like? What are the issues that we're going to overcome? How's that shaping up?
Yeah, so we've already started that outreach first with the Cannabis Advisory Committee, and I know a lot of you on this Zoom meeting, the conference today, were participating and providing public comment. So that was huge, and a lot of those agenda items that you saw on the CAC committee was really coming directly from the industry on things that they would like to see when we go to make changes to our regulations. So I think consolidation, I mean, of course, there's a lot of work involved, but I think it does solve a lot of issues before us. I think, the fact that we have 3 different licensing authorities and navigating each one of those process, that's always been a challenge for us and for you, probably more so for the people we serve, right? Who do we talk to? And, we're even seeing with the wildfires, we have, cultivators that need to move product. And they need to transport. They're not technically our licensees, but they're CDF licensees. So we have to coordinate together to give those disaster relief requests approved. And so a lot of that does make more sense under one department, right? Everything's happening under one department. I do think it makes us more nimble. It makes us more efficient. But then I think it is the opportunity for us to look at our current regulations. We've had the beauty of almost 3 years of licensing and implementation. And I think we have really, great data and information on what's working and what's not working. When you go back 3 years and we developed emergency regulations, we didn't really have a lot of what we were creating something on paper. We just didn't know what it was going to look like when it came to implementation. I mean, that's changed now. We have a lot of information. You guys have a lot of information to share with us. And so I think it really gives us an opportunity to say, okay, this is working, this isn't working, whether it's on the regulations, whether it's with metric. And so I think it's the opportunity, and it's not, I mean, that's why we started so soon. These conversations are going to continue, because I think it's really important that we hear from the associations, from our licensees, from our applicants about what it is you'd like to see change and with the new department.
Yeah, and in terms of change, what's that spectrum look like? Are we talking about bold, huge changes here? Are we looking at just simplifying the licensing process? Or how far are we talking about in scope or in possibility?
Well, obviously, we've got to get everybody under the same set of regulations. So there's the simplicity of, hey, let's get all of our regs have to go under one title. And how great would it be just to go to one set of regulations and find everything? So I think what you're going to find is there's a lot of simple stuff that needs to accomplish, but I also think there's room for bold changes. I don't know I don't know that I want to commit to bold changes, because I think a lot of our goals align, and we all know like certain things should change. So I think there's room for those goals that we want to accomplish, and there's room for maybe some bold.
Yeah,
I don't know what bold is.
We can dive into some of the legislative priorities and things that we've seen from the different trade groups and stakeholders. Right. I think it's just more like, hey, this experiment on these 3 years, this piece did not work. Let's just move on. Or how do we, in that sense, I guess. Yeah. One thing that's on, go ahead.
I'm just going to say this, and that's not all up to the BCC. This is the 3 licensing authorities, our agency, the administration. I would just say, I don't know that anything's off the table. I think we should be discussing everything and then finding and I think we also have to be strategic with our time. What can we accomplish by July 2021? And then what maybe can come later?
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Is there, one thing that's been top of mind is the succession of power, or how these agencies share responsibilities. Or, we've had some people say, hey, I'm a cultivator. Am I going to be dealing with the BCC and they're not going to know exactly what I know? And how are you guys thinking about blending the personnel to make sure the various license types have sophisticated people that they're dealing with and not have to get up the learning curve?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and just so you know, for the most part, our employees are really excited about that. They love the idea of merging the programs, also learning about different license types. But we're going to keep the experts on cultivation and manufacturing. We're not going to just all of a sudden July 1 say, hey, the BCC is going to start doing that, because we're going to obviously utilize that knowledge and expertise from each of the programs, but we're blending it into one. And then I think it's an opportunity for BCC licensing folks to learn about manufacturing and cultivation. But I think the goal for us is we don't want disruption in the industry. We want things to run smoothly come July 2021. We don't want a lot of disruption. So really, making sure we have some of that continuity, especially when it comes to knowledge, is really a goal of ours.
Great. And so, another big piece are taxes. How do you think this is going to be affected? Do you see consolidation, simplifying, lowering, moving of taxes? We all know cultivation tax is a crazy thing to try to track. We know excise tax is also hard to calculate and pick up as a burden to the distributor. Local taxes are high. State, you have your pick. But we also know with this budget shortfalls that we're experiencing, people, there are other groups looking at cannabis as a piggy bank. But we know that's not necessarily the case. If it's too high, it just fosters more activity in the illicit and or traditional. So I'm curious how you guys have been thinking about the tax piece.
Well, I think tax reform is on everybody's mind. When we look at, probably one of the single most biggest questions we get is, the taxes are too high. We need to change the tax structure. And of course, that's something that I think is important to the administration and all of us, and how best that we approach that. Of course, like I said, that goes beyond our authority at the Bureau, but certainly we're part of those conversations to how we could better structure this, because we do realize like the tremendous disadvantage it puts our licensees when they're competing with an unlicensed market that is not paying these taxes and licensing fees. And and then it also goes back to, there is an opportunity with these public university grants to not only fund projects regarding public health, but also funding like projects such as looking at the tax structure and how it could be reformed, looking at those kind of economics. So I think there is a lot of opportunity to do a lot more studies on what is affecting the cannabis industry and how we can do, look at making changes that's going to benefit the licensed market as a whole.
And so knowing that we have July 2021, do you have specific milestones or checkpoints you're looking to hit from now until then? With November and December is going to be, I don't even know what's going to happen, but it's hard to predict. I'm not trying to hold you to that. Everything's in flux, but what can we do as a community to have things there ready to go as we're rolling this out?
Right. So when consolidation was announced last January, we were up against July 2020 timeline. So the work on consolidation started back then. So and probably the two biggest pieces for us is developing a consolidated budget, right? That has to go through, the administration and the legislature, because now instead of 3 departments, we're 1 department. And looking at any changes we need to make in the budget trailer bill for statutory language. And so those are really key things that need to happen. And then we've developed working groups for every possible, for enforcement and licensing, and how we're going to consolidate within. Like I said, we want to make sure we're streamlining the process. So when it comes July 2021, you're not experienced like, oh my gosh, things aren't going well. We wanted to smooth the transition, and we're looking at consolidating the regs and regs changes, but then we're also looking at, you have to put everybody under one email address. You're looking at a new website, new logos. So we are working on all of those pieces. And yes, we have specific timelines to get stuff rolling. And then of course, stakeholder outreach, starting with the advisory committee, hopefully we'll be doing a lot more during the fall of stakeholder outreach, talking with you. A lot of you have been really great, even with the advisory committee, with sending a lot of your comments, your public comments to us. And those are all helpful to us to inform our decisions. And like I said, when you looked at the agenda for the advisory committee, a lot of that was coming straight from the cannabis industry itself on things they would like to see. I think it's exciting times, by the way. As much as work as it is, I think, like, I don't know, when you look at other industries, how many times do you get to really look at things and make really tremendous change in your industry and participate in that process? And I think it's in a very short period of time, we have the opportunity to make some really significant changes. And I think that's really pretty exciting. 3 years in, who would have thought that, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, we're here, I think, because a lot of the pieces didn't work the way it was, laid out. It was all theoretical.
Yeah.
And, we went through emergency regulations 4 times, right? We went through implementation a bunch of times. I think we all had to get our sea legs under us to a certain extent, and in order to figure that out. And I think now that we have that muscle memory and that rapport and relationships, we can do a better job. So, appreciate on the consolidation. We want to shift into metric, track and trace. This is not something that's under your responsibility per se. But with the consolidation of the agencies, it'd be under the department. I'd love to hear sort of, how that piece is being thought about in the incorporation of that one department. And in general, how has the rollout been from your perspective? I mean, from January 16th really is when we started. The scoreboard went on, and here we are.
Yeah, I think rolling out any kind of IT system or tracking system is rough on both sides, right? It's a system, you've got to learn. I know from your side of it, David, you especially, there's a big learning curve for all of our licensees, to go from not tracking a product to tracking every package throughout the supply chain. And we did give people that ramp up time to get into the metric system. And then, as you know, last year, at the end of October, we required everybody to be in that system. And I think you've seen over the last year, compliance rate has gone way up with people utilizing the system. But I also think we're looking at ways that we can make the system more efficient. And again, a lot of the information, a lot of you are in that system every day, all day, and have brought to us, hey, things that might, make things more efficient or things that don't make sense. And really, we've taken a look at those things. But I'm going to tell you, even our staff, even though it's under CDFA, we have a dedicated unit that just deals with our licensees and their track and trace issues and resolving issues they're having with the system, maybe something they, got entered in wrong. And so we've gotten ourselves very knowledgeable in the system. But I think, my staff is constantly looking at, hey, we think we should do this, or things that need to change. And the other great thing is that we've been starting to talk with other states around the country that are using metric, and really figuring out how with other states, because a lot of times we're all having the same challenges maybe with metric, and how we can together, leverage some really good efficiencies in the system. So, I think sometimes, like with any IT system, again, you're rolling something out for the biggest cannabis market in the country. And I think there's been some hurdles, but I think for the most part, the product's been moving through the supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a learning curve. I mean, I can imagine what the support tickets look like over and over again on, hey, where can I find this button or tag, or hey, I have negative inventory, what happened, or hey, how, so it's a lot. And I think what's interesting is one of the survey questions we received was, how can operators get support from Metric, not necessarily from an agency? And that's been tough, because what ends up happening is we talk to you, you talk to them, they talk to you back, and then it creates this unnecessary middleman when we could get a direct answer. And other states have that, but so I'm curious if you guys have explored creating some sort of way to lessen that administrative burden, because we've, like last year when we talked about the database of questions that were being asked, this is kind of a similar arena in helping operators get up to speed, but also seek direct support without having to go through those hurdles.
Yeah, no, that I think you hit, that's a great question, because you are right. How there's a lot of back and forth, right? You go to Metric comes to us, we may be calling you. And so I think for us, we're looking at ways where we can provide Metric from us. Hey, these are how we want you to handle these tickets. These don't need to come to us first. You don't need to get our approval, but here is how, for example, the lab tickets. This is, if it has the following things, go ahead and, take care of them. And I think we need to do more of that with Metric. I feel like for them, utilizing them more, making sure they have the bandwidth also to handle these directly, but stopping the back and forth, because it takes a lot of the CDFA, the Bureau, it takes a lot of our resources going back and forth, when a lot of times, like you said, it really can be just directly with Metric. And I think that part of that is just getting a comfort level with Metric and making sure that what they're doing is, they work for, they're our contractor, and just making sure we have that comfort level that they're guiding you in the right way. Because the last thing we want to happen is Metric says, oh yeah, go ahead and do this. And then we come and say, oh, don't do that. So I think you're going to see more of that over the next year, because like you said, with the changes coming, we're going to have continued changes. We've got to, find ways to make it more, you guys getting an answer so you can handle these tickets. And we feel the same way, because we're getting the tickets too. So
yeah, I mean, it's crazy. We end up, they tell you to email multiple people and do this and that. It just creates all this extra email. We don't need more email.
Gosh, no, It's email fatigue.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it is. So we're working with Richard's team to start setting up, I think it's important we probably meet with the folks that use Metric the month and start having those conversations on a more regular basis. And not that this is part of the Metric conversation, but I think just in general, I think having more access to us as a group to bring these issues forward. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, it's great that you did this survey, but a lot of times some of this information I want it on a more regular basis, not just when we do these presentations. And I think we need to try to have the avenue of you guys feeling comfortable enough that whether it's monthly meetings with the associations or a Metric, your Metric experts, just to share this information.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is because there hasn't been that support mechanism, the industry itself had to stage up our own support system. I mean, Meadow, I think we did 20 different Metric trainings, both in-person webinar. We've trained up, I think, around 800 people. We've also, at the CDA, we created a whole metric group that is a liaison to CDTFA and metric. And that was, we did a lot. But then what ended up happening a couple months ago, actually for the last 3 months, metric's been down. There's been significant downtime from a reliability perspective. Their contracts, 99.9%. I think we got maybe 92%. And some of the regulations that we deal with when it goes down is that distro stops. Well, okay, if distro stops, now this whole thing stops. What retail can keep going. Or another issue we've been dealing with is just the nightmare of, okay, you send your report up, it says error, but it's actually accepted, or all of these things that we don't have any control on. And so, the question that we asked Richard was like, hey, how do we get an audit of metric API performance? And then the question is like, what will that do? Will that allow them to come in and solidify their support and their system? They did add rate limiting, which they've been responsive and helpful with. That's helped. But in general, it's tough for a lot of us. And we're wondering, with contracts, like, are we going to see metric in the future? Is this like, are we here for it? Should we just dig in? Are there any other options? I'm not sure if because budgets, like, it's a huge budget piece that I'm curious if you guys thought about.
Well, obviously, there are a contractor now. We can always look at things. It's not like I'm going to say that it has to stay this way forever, but we do have to look at, how feasible is it? Is it feasible to move away from metric? What are the costs? Is it, and I think those are conversations that we can have, those conversations with you and CDA, because I think it's important to have you part of those conversations. So I don't know that I have an answer there, but we did, if you noticed, we have got, especially from the California Distributors Association, hey, your regulations, when metric goes down, we can't do anything. And that's why it was part of that. We had it on our agenda because, again, it's one of those things that theoretically, it sounds reasonable to say, hey, if the system goes down, movement has to stop. But I don't think we ever imagined it would probably be on, I think on those times where, something really severe, not because this is happening on a regular basis. And I agree with you. Then the regulations don't really work. Yeah. They didn't account for that.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, I think in general, because they report to you, just holding them accountable, or they report to California, just holding them accountable and having that reliability, and say what they do what they say type of role. But we'll have more on that for sure. Glad that you guys have gotten around there. So shifting to the next topic, we want to go into social equity.
Sure.
And it's a tough job. Cannabis is a huge experiment, and we're learning as we go. And there are a lot of experiments happening across the state. And what's interesting is social equity is being staged up in these local municipalities. Everyone kind of has their own flavor of it. The equity grant money went out. You just published this huge 500-page report.
I got it right here.
I want that. It's huge. I'd love to hear, like, what were your takeaways for the people that didn't read it? What did you learn? What did you see? What can we, gain from that report?
I think, well, one, at the time of the report, not all the money had been dispersed. I can say all the money has been dispersed between the Bureau and GoBiz. So $40 million is out the door. And I think, this first report, I think what we really learned is most of the jurisdiction was in the process or had just gotten their money. So I think you're not. So you're seeing just a lot of baseline data of like how many equity licensees and applicants were identified. You have some demographic information. Any new ordinances that were put in place. So I think you're a lot of that entry level data that the jurisdiction had been collecting. I think on the next report, and that's due January 1, you're going to see more data on how the funds are being used. Some of the outcomes of the utilization of those funds. So I think it's really, as big as it is, it's a pretty good read and an easy read, because we divided it up by each jurisdiction, and we divided up, the first part of the report is the 10 million the Bureau distributed. And that's probably the most information you're going to find is there. And then you have the 15 million that GoBiz distributed for the Bureau, and then the 15 million they had. And you're going to see, gives you a good insight of what the money basically what it's going to be utilized for each jurisdiction. They give, each jurisdiction has their priorities on how the funds are going to be used and how they identify equity applicants and licensees. And then you're going to see in some of it for the tier 1 money to help jurisdictions do their cannabis equity assessment and get their equity program up and running. So as long as it is, I think it's a pretty good read if anybody, and it's on our website, but if anybody wants this, we did print a limited number of copies. Yeah. We can do it. So, but I did, I have my, I'm going to put something up on the screen and share my screen, but I have to have people help me do this. So I did want to talk about the technical assistant unit we have. And we just, we have staff that we've hired that their sole duty is to work with the local jurisdictions and also provide technical assistance to equity applicants and licensees. And so I'm putting up on my screen just so you guys see it. It basically tells what it is that unit does. And we do have a dedicated email address and phone number. And the email address is bccequity@dca.ca.gov. But I'm happy to email this to you so you can send it out to everybody. Sure. And then we're starting to do regional workshops across the state. Last week, we did one with San Francisco and Oakland, and really with their equity applicants and licensees. And we really just did a little program with them, and then a workshop on what we can do, what resources we can provide, and then we did like a Q&A at the end. So I really wanted to let equity applicants and licensee know that this is available for them. Mm-hmm. And we are, and I know as much as we don't want to email, but you can email it, but you can also call us, and we're happy to have those one-on-one conversations. And really a lot of what we're going to do with the technical assistance is provide any, if you need information on how to get licensed, how to do a business modification, how to make changes in your license. If you're having trouble on a certain part of your application, we're there to help you, really shepherd people through the process.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really encouraging to see this sort of gear switch into not just the theoretical and the money going to get out, but now it's getting out there. A handful of people that wrote in on the survey asked about what's accountability look like? What does oversight look like? How do you ensure that this rollout is successful? How and keeping different municipalities accountable on on their implementation.
Well, I think that's twofold. One, making sure you're constantly having communication with the local jurisdictions, answering their questions. There's things that they'll ask us, hey, can we spend the money on that? And really having those that constant communication. We have somebody that's assigned to the local jurisdictions to just do that, have monthly meetings with all of them. I think it's important for the local jurisdictions to share what they're doing with one another instead of all of us, everybody having their separate programs. I think, you can find that getting them together also make sure for successful programs. And then, like, obviously with the reports that, we've already started, hey, get ready. We're going to need all your numbers on the numbers of identified equity applicants and licensees, their demographic information, how they're using the money. So I think that's a lot of the reporting process. And then anytime that we are funding, whoever it is, grant funding, whether it's a public university, whether it's equity grants, we're always going to, as a state, go in and make sure those funds are being utilized properly and appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that would really help is just expediting the process. This was another survey or answer that came in. It's just a win would be a reduction in the requirements to submit redundant applications for multiple licenses. A win would be shortening the time and the processing of the applications. We know it takes a year, multiple years to go through that. And, what we saw in LA, especially, people are holding on to property for a year and a half, 2 years before they were even able to get running. And then they finally went with the temporary licensing piece and opened it up. So like time is kind of one of the biggest things on getting people through. Have you thought about how we can expedite that process?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at expediting the process, we wouldn't be, it's very difficult for us. We can't expedite the local process because they have their processes. So I think for us, though, is providing them whatever, assistance we can to get people through the process. One of the things on the state side, I think we do have a lot more control on what that looks like. And, I think, and Nicole's been very instrumental as well. And how can we, we're doing almost the same process. How can we sort of like merge those processes a little bit better? So if we're getting information that the locals need, how can we share that with them so you don't have applicants providing the exact same information? Yep. and really looking at how best that happens. And sometimes that's difficult because a lot of times you're starting first with the locals and then with the state. So I think that is something where we feel it's pretty important to figure out how we can streamline that with the local jurisdiction, with the challenge that, we have, when you look at the number of cities and counties, that can be challenging. But I think, a lot of times you can do that with technology as well, right? And streamline those processes. But one of the things, and I would really encourage any equity applicants or licensees to contact our unit, is we want to be able to track our equity applicants. So once you're identified as an equity applicant or licensee, we're looking at tracking that through our process, being able to look in our licensing system and go, okay, this is the number of equity applicants we can't have. This is where they're in where they are at in our state licensing process, and really also look at, what license types they're applying for. So I think really looking at ways we can be more efficient in prioritizing those applications. And, obviously the first thing is identifying them, right? If you don't know who they are, it's hard to prioritize them. And, but I feel like, we want to get people through the process, right? We don't want them languishing for 2 years trying to get their annual. And there are challenges with CEQA, challenges with getting conditional use permits. But we got to persevere on this. Yeah. That's what I keep saying, persevere. Well, but
and with the consolidation, there could be a pathway here. That we can create. So we're definitely encouraged by that. And, I really do just want to say thank you for the effort that you're putting there. I can't tell you how important it is from the people that we work with in equity of what you're doing, and how many states are looking at this program and figuring out how they roll it out. And not just that, but other industries, right? Cannabis is just the first. As we look at what's happening in the world right now with, a lot of it is due from the collateral damage on the war on drugs, the social inequities that we're seeing, the racial injustice that we're seeing. So this is a step forward to make that right. And we want to do everything that we can to make sure everyone's successful here, because it's hard.
It is really hard. And I'm gonna say this, the staff in our unit, I'm very impressed. They're so committed to this, and they tell me stories every day that's very touching. Like, they're calling folks and they're actually doing check-ins with them every couple of weeks, and how grateful the industry has been to have that. Like you say, we get email fatigue. We sometimes forget how important it is to pick up the phone and talk people through things. And I think that's not lost on us at the Bureau, having that pick up the phone and call people. Sometimes you can't do that. You can't really, it's harder to do it with an email to express, how important it is to the Bureau. We want equity applicants and licensees to be successful. And, we're pretty committed to that. And I really want folks to know, if you're struggling with, when you struggle with something, we procrastinate, right? When you don't know, sometimes we all do it. I do it all the time. And it is really there. That is there. We're dedicated to the equity applicants, licensees, and the community they serve as well. So anyway, I just wanted to say that.
No, it's great. It's one of the biggest things that we're putting a lot of energy into, and the timing is right for it. So we really appreciate that. So the question sort of came in around just how can we, we're talking about budgets. So moving on to the topic of enforcement, we had all this money being generated in revenue, even, cultivation tax, excise, all of that. A portion of it is allotted to enforcement. How is it being spent? Is there a world where we can reallocate that into community development? Right? There's a lot of it, not just in cannabis, but in general, what's going on with police and the budgets and with the budget shortfalls that we're experiencing. Where does this fall in line? How can we help with that? I remember one of my friends working in Oakland was able to divert some of the budget from the police department into helping homeless people during COVID. So I'm not sure what you've been seeing or how you're thinking about it, but I'd be curious to hear where you stand on there.
Well, and I know when you look at, where like the tax money is going, I mean, there's specific, as you know, it's going to all sorts of programs. And if we want to change that allocation, that would have to be a legislative change. And maybe that is something we need to look at, because again, things have changed, right? And the 4.5 years I've been here, things have changed. So, I think those are conversations, that the associations and the industry should be having on how best to allocate that tax money. But at this point, it's pretty, it's in statute on how that is. As for our budget with enforcement, it's specific, obviously we have, the cannabis enforcement unit, the sworn staff is now under the Bureau as of July 1. Our specific task is really, our priority has been going after the unlicensed market. So, for at least this next year, that is a priority for us with the Bureau's budget, is to make sure that we are going after that unlicensed market, because I feel like that has to continue to put the pressure on that. And we have had a lot of, enforcement action just in the last couple of months. You're seeing a lot of big enforcement action. And like anything else, David, whether it's licensing, track and trace, even when it comes to dealing with the unlicensed market, we get better with time. I mean, like wine, right? We're getting better with time, and we're trying to really hone in and really, and so I think you're seeing that.
I guess we've seen that. I saw a headline the other day. I think it was Cushy Punch with, it happened almost years ago, it feels like, but the enforcement on that is just starting to come up. And then I think it was like $1 billion of 527 days of illicit activity. I mean, there you go. You could shore up the budget right there.
There you go. Just like that.
Just like that. There you go.
I know.
But have you thought about like where that money goes? Like when you, the fines that are being introduced, like, does that just feed back into your budget, or like, does that go into helping community development, or where are you?
That's a great question. I would first like to, I first want to get some civil penalty money. But you know what? I'm not exactly sure where all that money goes, but it's certainly a great question. Sure. We're pretty focused on getting more civil penalties being able to identify who we can issue those civil penalties, and then trying to collect that. As you know, that's the other side of it, right? Yep. Trying to the collection of it.
Yep. Yeah, and then there was a question that came through on just when you're talking about budgets. One line item is the $30 million for public university grants. I'm not sure if you've started that process and seeing proposals on universities looking to study that. Have you seen that at all?
Yeah, currently right now we're in the, we issued the report for proposal, and last week was the deadline for the university to submit any questions they had for the Bureau. And then our deadline's this Friday to answer those questions. We haven't received any proposals yet, as far as I know, but their deadline is in like mid-October, just towards so I'll have more information for you on how many proposals we get. I think there's based on the questions we're getting, there's a lot of interest from universities. And then I know.
Imagine. Can you imagine being in college and just game on? Yeah.
You know, and they, rightly so. We've had, we've got $30 million is a lot, but I think the university are hungry to do some research, and good for them, because I'm really, based on the questions, I'm really excited about what proposals we may see. So, and again, you were saying it, California is innovative, creative. You guys are, are when you talk about innovation, that's the cannabis industry, and I think you're seeing that from these public universities as well. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see what they're going to be researching, and much needed, by the way. I mean, as much as we have information on how implementation is going, I think that research is much needed to inform our decisions going forward.
Well, and take away some of this misinformation. It's just hasn't been able to be studied in such a long time. So. No, that's great. And then just to tie up the thing on enforcement and civil penalties, we'll look into that, and then we'll reach out. I think that there's an opportunity here with consolidation and how those budgets look like, and just inform how the consolidation priorities are going to look like. So anyway, shifting gears to the next piece. You're doing great, by the way. This is really informative. The chat is like, people are here. So thank you for the energy and the transparency. The next topic is legislative priorities for trade groups and the industry in general. We knew this year we didn't really get a lot done. Obviously, with the COVID, the legislative cycles, the budget shortfalls, cannabis trailer bill, all of that. But we've been surfacing a lot of different issues, and you've met with stakeholders, and I'm curious to hear what you're seeing. The first topic being on trade samples. That's been a big one that has been asked about. Do you feel free to just take that, or what's your idea there?
Yeah, I mean, so you know this. When it comes to legislative proposals, we don't really weigh in on what your priorities are or proposals. Our job as the Bureau and CDFA and Public Health is really to provide technical assistance when requested by the legislature. But I think it's a good thing that we know what your legislative priorities are, because I think, and I think talking to us, because there may be, again, you may have a great idea. And by the way, trade samples, I know like that's like something that the industry really wants, but sometimes talking with us, we can look and maybe point out some issues that we're seeing that you may want to consider when you're, going to the legislature and looking for an author and writing and drafting up your proposal. So I always think it's a good idea to talk with us. And then, our goals, I think a lot of times our goals are going to be aligned. A lot of times there will be times that maybe they don't. And I think that's okay too. But I think a lot of, I think we all want to see a successful cannabis industry in California. And so I think it's also important that we, at the same time, there could be something that you think is a legislative proposal, and we may say, hey, maybe we can accomplish that in the regulations. So I think I think you should reach out to us, and I think it's important information to have, but we don't insert ourselves in that process with the legislature unless we're asked to provide technical assistance.
Yeah, I think we'll bring that up in the consolidation part. I guess another question was just really, where's California's competitive landscape, right? There's this inevitability that legalization is coming. But we also see a lot of people fleeing California because of the high regulations, or just, they want to leave into other states that may have a better environment. I mean, we want to keep skilled, knowledgeable cannabis workers in California. I mean, can we get more competitive with taxes, with the regulatory environment? How do you think about California's position relative to these other markets that are opening up?
Well, I think you're always going to have people looking elsewhere. I don't know that you can completely stop that, but, at least when, we work a lot with the other regulators in other states, and I'm always going to say, like, nobody compares to California. That sounds, they don't. I don't, whether it's our geographic diversity, just the climate of, not lately the climate, but without the wildfires, but just in general, I think we have a robust cannabis industry like no other in the country. And, when you look at where we're at with equity and just the sheer number of licenses that we have. And again, we're looking, I think, as you say, more and more cities and counties are going to start opening up. I don't know. I think it doesn't get any better for the cannabis industry than here in California. And I think we have the best cannabis, right? Really, I don't know that I think people are going to look other places, but I think we're very competitive here. I think we just need the fact that we're talking about how do we be more competitive, and you're right, we're looking at tax reform. How can we streamline processes, maybe less regulatory burdens? Because I know I say this a lot, but when we were developing those emergency regulations 4 years ago, like it was back in 2017, the climate in California, we had the Cole memo was still in place. We were worried that if we license people, the feds may come in and, demolish them, all of those things. And part of the Cole memo, you have to have a comprehensive regulatory structure. So, so there was a lot of thought at that time, but gosh, in 4 years, look how much has changed. So I do feel like the time is to look at, are those regulatory, all of our regulations, is that it's a different climate now, now that we're going through consolidation. I guess that's the point. And I always and people complain, and I get it, by the way, your regulations are too burdensome. But then I always go back and say, but at the time, that's
what we had to do.
Everything.
I remember that there was this point where you were saying, hey, we have adult use and medical. If we don't, there could be a chance where adult use gets enforced upon from the federal government. Like, should we combine these supply chains or keep them separate? That was a great example of
remember that? We had them separate
exactly.
For 6 months. And
but we were exactly. So I think those examples allow us to kind of forecast what we need to think about as we, the entire country, lights up.
And doesn't it seem crazy that we were separating? But at the time, it did make sense, but it would make no sense now, right? I know. It's It is crazy.
Exactly. And so that's why I'm like, as we look forward in the consolidation, that's one point. There was another question that came through from the trade groups around allowing manufacturers to arrange for lab testing. We know lab testing is really handled at distro, but third-party lab samples, allowing additional venues for sample collection reduces transport costs. Have you thought about, lab testing in general and allowing it to move to manufacturing?
I think that's a bigger conversation.
Yeah. You can't answer that in the last 5 minutes? Okay.
No, I don't think so. But again, it's looking, I think, again, we want to look at the entire supply chain. I mean, I don't think it makes any sense for the Bureau to just look at distribution, retail, and lab testing without looking at cultivation and manufacture. I say this all the time. We got to look at the entire, how things affect when you look at it, our regs affect manufacturing, cultivation, and vice versa. And so I love the idea through consolidation that we're looking at that lens. How do we improve the supply chain? And maybe I'm going to say that's something we should consider. Is that going to improve? What does that look like downstream? And I think we need to take that global approach.
Great.
As we look at any regulatory consolidation.
Yeah, I mean, that bill was just vetoed, I think, by Newsom. So we've had to put all these different bills in place, and it's allowed us to kind of understand the different fixes we need. And what's great is having the agencies go through that scenario analysis of what would a better supply chain look like is so important. And hopefully these proposed legislation initiatives sort of provides a lot of that insight of why we're trying to do what we're doing. But I think keeping the supply chain, with integrity. So, that's good. Another question is, you've been having listening workshops. How are they going? What has been helpful? What can we do to make them more impactful?
I think, obviously listening workshops means you listen. I think sometimes we need to do more listening than talking.
Anything that's come up?
Yeah. No, obviously we're always wanting input from the industry on how better. I think it's fine to look ahead, but there's times that you may need relief from things right now too. I don't want to just say, hey, we can't talk about things that are affecting you right now, and maybe changes that we're able to make, and we've seen that a lot with the disaster relief. I will say this, if there's one regulatory section we keep in place, it's disaster relief. Who knew when we put that in our regs that we would be utilizing it as much as we have in 2020? And I'll tell you what, that's given us the flexibility we've needed to respond to disasters. So I feel like, any workshops where we can hear what people are saying and provide answers and comments, it just makes us better. And if you have ideas and the audience has ideas of what more maybe something we need to be doing and doing more of these listening sessions, actually, we want to hear from you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a good segue. In disasters, fires have been, this year is historic, but we've also had 3 previous years of fires. This time, which used to be way more celebratory, Croptober has become it's anxiety. There are people evacuating, crops have burned, state of emergency was declared. So, what impact do you anticipate this having on the supply chain? What disaster relief do you anticipate happening? Besides just saying, hey, you're allowed to move your product to a distro or things like that, what ideas or concepts have you been thinking about?
Well, and
more importantly, how do we help those that are affected?
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give a shout out for a lot of the local jurisdictions like San Francisco and Oakland and LA and all of them. They were on the ground when stuff was happening with disaster, whether it's the fire or the civil unrest. And they were then calling us and saying, what can we do for our licensees? And it was really a great thing, to say, here's the disaster relief. You can go ahead and move product. You don't even need, when it comes to disaster and you're going to lose product, or the product will be degraded due to a fire, most of the time you don't have to get approval from us. You can just move it and tell us at a later date. And so I really was impressed with how involved the locals were and us. And I think we need to build on that, by the way, that communication. Sometimes I feel like so many of our communications are with the industry from the state, and then separate communications with the local jurisdiction. And I think if there's a way we can, have more conversations, like we did that equity workshop with San Francisco and Oakland. We had the local jurisdiction there to talk about their program. And I think more of that is really necessary for us to deal with, a lot of challenges that we know we're going to have over the next couple of years. And bringing them more into that process, I think, is a good thing.
Yeah.
Can I answer your question? Maybe I didn't answer your question.
Well, I think that, I like the context, but I think why I would love a little bit more clarity on is, like, how are we helping those that have been affected?
Yes.
Or what can we do in terms of, the disaster relief or things that you're seeing?
I think, so we hear from people, but probably not as much as you are hearing from them. I'm always surprised when people are telling me about something that's going on. Maybe it's Humboldt, maybe it's down south, and I don't, and sometimes we don't always know about it. So I think one is making sure we know the scope of the problem. I know the industry itself, you guys talk a lot, you have your circle, and not necessarily the regulator is on that communication chain. So I think it's really important that we understand the scope of the problem, because the sooner we know there's a problem, the sooner we can start planning on what's our next move. And I always feel like, I'll be honest with you, I don't spend a lot of time on social media. Surprise, I'm an old person, I guess, but I don't. And I know that's where a lot of communication. So I want to know what you're hearing out there, so we can start strategically planning how we can prepare for things or react to things.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll be reaching out with some things. So we're closing up here. That time went quick. Thank you so much.
Can I bring up our new website just for a second?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, actually there's a bunch of things. So, all the people here, we're very action oriented. You have their attention. Like, what can we do to help? What information do you need from us? How do we get involved? If it's the website, sure. But, go for it. This is your time to shine.
I wanted to bring it up just because we did revamp our website. I don't know how many looked at it, but front and center, you're going to see all of our licenses. So, like at a glance, each separate license type. We've changed the top banner. We have an area for social equity. Anyway, love feedback on what more information you'd like to see on our website, because we know we could make this even better. So I'd love that. The unified license search, there's a survey there. That's a beta license search for the unified license search. Any feedback on that as well would be it would be really helpful. And then again, what is the best way that we can communicate more efficiently and more frequently?
Yeah, the only feedback I have there is, let's take that retail and non-storefront and let's quadruple that. That would be
there. You
awesome.
Go. And some of the micro business, some of those micro business are retail as well. But I completely agree with you. But at least you guys can go quickly if you want to see how many. It updates every day, and when you click on it, it has this little ticker tape thing, and it's my favorite part. See the things that entertain me. So anyway, I think what we're trying to do is get more information out to you. So you're not having, this is something I use every day just to make sure I know what's going on out there. So anyway, yeah. I hope that's helpful. Anyway.
No, that's great to know that that's something that's living on your tab. that's, we should be paying more attention there. So we'll do that. Okay, that's time. Thank you so much, Lori. You should take a moment, look at everybody that's here for you. And
I will.
I really appreciate you.
Thank you. And thanks to everybody. You guys have always been so supportive, and I'm so touched that you invited me to participate. And maybe next year we get to go camping again. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we've reserved June 11th through the 13th.
I was going to wear a cap, baseball cap. But
we have hazmat suits ready for everybody.
Right. All right, you guys.
All right. Thank you, Lori.
All right. Bye.